Hi, welcome to another talk on by me on gender stereotyping. So, I'm Madhujit, and good to have you here. In my last session, I did talk about stereotypes, but today I'm going to talk specifically on gender stereotyping. So taking from last time we talked about, I talked about uh, an experiment that BBC had done, and it's available on YouTube as well, about these uh, the girls' toys and boys' toys. So the kids were cross-dressed, the girls as boys and boys as girls. And what happened in that is that and they called strangers to play with the kids, and it was seen that the kids who were dressed as girls, in fact they were boys, so the kids who were dressed as girls, the strangers offered them dolls and other types of toys which are very very girly toys, and the kids who were dressed as boys, that they were actually girls, were kind of handled a little roughly, and they were put on a scooter, or the toy scooter, etc. So, and when the strangers were asked, the strangers thought it was the children's choices, but when they were told that they were cross-dressed, that they told the gender was different than what they assumed, the strangers suddenly had a realization it was perhaps their own choices. So this is how we stereotype, or this is how we assume that the girls would like pink and the boys would like blue. This is not nature, it is absolutely growing up. So gender stereotype, in a technical definition, what does it mean? Gender stereotype is a generalized view or perception of men or women about their characteristics or attributes that they ought to possess, or the role they ought to perform based on their gender. So once again, it's the attributes or characteristics they ought to possess. When I say ought to possess, means what we assume, or what we've been taught, or what we know they should have these attributes or characteristics. And the gender roles are what the roles that they ought to perform based on the gender. These stereotypes have been extremely harmful, specifically when it limits individuals' abilities to pursue their professional careers. It limits their capacity. It limits their capacity to develop their personal abilities and their. Hi Piyush, good to see you here. So welcome. I see you sometimes on these Facebook lives as well. So welcome. Back to about the stereotyping. The stereotyping limits men and women's ability to develop their personal capacity or personal abilities. Hey Claire, belated birthday wishes to you. Hope you had a good one. And they also limit their ability to pursue the career choices, what they choose, and they also limit their choices about the lives they lead. The stereotypes really, really are harmful, and some of the harmful stereotypes, can be directly hostile, like, oh, she can't do it, she's too emotional, or women are too emotional, or men, they're strong and they shouldn't cry. So these are harmful. But the other stereotypes are also, they're sounding benign, sometimes even benevolent, but they're harmful to individuals. Like, you're a girl, don't even try this, or you're a boy, you shouldn't be wearing those bright colors, etc. So it's harmful for individuals. We have to realize that. And the world has come to recognize that these stereotypes are limiting the specifically if I take women in the world, we all know it limits the choices of women. It limits their access to their constitutional rights as well. It limits their right to health, right to education, right to marriage, right to a standard of living, right to when she chooses to get married or when she chooses to have children. It limits her freedom of expression, freedom of movement. I mean, a lot of Sandeep, hi. Women are bad driver was my last week's topic, and we are going to take that up soon. So, and so it limits their choices as well. Freedom. It limits their freedom of movement, also. Now, all this impacts how women perform, and Catherine Kaufman had done. This is again and when I say stereotyping, it's not women stereotype against men or men stereotype against women. It is both men and women have the stereotypes or follow the stereotypes that are meant for the specific group. So like Sandeep says that women are bad drivers. So it's not only men who think that, it's even women think that. So it's true for all of us. That's what we've grown up with, and that's what we start believing it's true. So what happens, as I was saying, this Harvard professor, assistant professor in Harvard, Catherine Kaufman, did an experiment. And what she did was she gave some questions, absolute trivia questions, a set of questions to a group of both men and women. And the trivia questions were traditionally what women would know better. That is, a set of questions had things like cooking, art, etc., which women are expected to know better. And the other set was which men are supposed to know better: the maths, the strategy, the politics, etc. So what happened was, after the test, the group of people were expected to were given a name, a random person's name, and asked to hypothetically assume how would they have performed in the particular test. So I've done my test and I'm given a name. Let's say I'm given a name of Sandeep Chawda, and I know he's a guy. So when I give my assumption how Sandeep has performed in this test, I will score Sandeep higher in the maths abilities and the strategic abilities, and I will score Sandeep lower on things on cooking, even on cooking and on the other art, etc. Even though I know Sandeep is from hospitality background previously. So when a stranger's name is given to me, I assess them at that level without even knowing the person, without even having any information about that individual. I do that. So, and that test revealed that the women's confidence is much lower in professionals. So it's not that it's not nature. It is not by design. It is by socialization that it happens. So I mean, how does women not perform so well in those abilities is when we talk about, again, coming back to BBC, there was another experiment done by them. Again, that's also available on YouTube. The BBC, it's called Redraw the Balance. So what they did in that is they asked a group of students to draw a firefighter, and after they did that, they were asked to draw a surgeon, and after that, they were asked to draw a fighter pilot, and they asked children to explain and give them a name. So obviously, somebody's name is John, somebody's name is something which is all male, and after they finished that, the teacher asked the students, would you like to meet the real people? And 3 women walked in: a surgeon, a fighter pilot, and a firefighter. So they walk in, and one of the reaction is, oh, they're all dressed up. So we've come to a level where when we see them real, we don't believe in their abilities, or we don't believe that they're true. So in that experiment, out of 61 drawings, total 61 drawings, only 7 were that of women. Everybody else drew a man. So, hi Rajni. So what happened in that is that what they realized, that the perception about stereotypes about women's career or men's career starts at as young as age as between 5 and 7. And when this happens, what means it limits us as individuals, as kids itself, what we aspire to be and what we want to be. It is a tough task for them. So and what happened because of this stereotyping, girls as tender, girls at the age of as tender as 7 start considering themselves less intelligent than boys. I'll say that again. It's surprising. And specifically, even though girls sometimes score better than boys, but they start considering themselves less intelligent than boys at a tender age of 7. And that is what stereotype does to our society. And this is about girls, but when we talk about boys, in terms of boys, teenage boys in terms of conforming to what the norms are, what they're told, what other boys are doing, what they turn out to be is that be a man. And what does it mean to them? Bullying others sometimes, and talking about we know about this boys locker room. So that the behavior, some of the behaviors which are there are to conform to the norms that have been determined by the group they belong to. So it is considered boyish. If they don't do it, they are not considered enough a man. And what this leads to is what we call it as toxic masculinity sometimes. And toxic masculinity is not only harmful for women, it's extremely harmful even for men. So what Gillette had, after that Me Too movement, Gillette had come out with an ad which was called "The Best a Man Can Be," and and in that ad, if you see, it's like when they're seeing other boys, fighting, they're asking men to go and intervene because fighting is not. I mean, if you tell them, okay, the boys are going to fight, and these are the boys who are going to be growing up as men. So if we start at that level, the boys will understand the stereotypes which are there and start talking about it. Claire says it's scary how biased we are. Indeed, how biased we are. I mean, it's scary how and Claire, this is a beautiful point because we assume that somebody else is biased and I'm not. But the fact remains, whether I'm a man or a woman, we all carry the same biases. And while you bring that up, I'd like to bring this particular thing about the implicit association test. It's by Harvard University. It's called Project Implicit. So what they've done is they've actually created a free resource across the world for men and women, for anybody in the world to take the test. And with the speed that you touch the keys, they tell you how biased you are. And surprisingly, the gender bias is equal in men and women. It's not that the men have gender bias against women, or it's exactly the same. It's 70% if we are biased. Most women are biased against women. We cannot associate women in the corporate world. We associate women more with home. We don't associate women with corporate world. So I encourage all of you to go and see this. So while I say this, the most interesting part that I like about this IAT is that implicit association test is that when I tell you that it was the main scientists, social scientists who were behind this are Anthony Greenwald and Mahzareen Banaji. So when I say Mahzareen Banaji, I also like to share that she's from Hyderabad and she studied in St. Anne's School, Nizam's College. So all those who are from Hyderabad over here would, you would really feel related to that and probably have a smile. And this is something very, what we say, it's non-threatening. The outcome of it is not going to impact whether we know her or whether we relate to her because we belong to the same city. But when during interviews, what happens, when we see this, men and women, we look at somebody like me. The moment I see somebody like me, I smile, and I'm going to be I'm going to be more lenient to this individual who's like me. And that's how we have more men coming in. If we have an assumption that women during child rearing age are all not going to be productive at workplace, when the moment we see a resume which the child rearing age is, because we have this stereotype about women in workforce that women in child rearing age, will need more holidays and more vacation time, or they'll definitely have a child. So what will happen is that bias is going to color my perception of her abilities to perform at workplace. And in a contest, I would choose a man over a woman in this case. And this is irrespective of whether I'm a woman or a man. The person who's choosing is a woman and man. So we are all biased, and the biases are the same. So we are all in it together. So how is it impacting us? If you look at, I'm going to take 3 examples: politics, society, and workplace. So in politics, when the last election, U.S. election, was between Hillary Clinton and our President Trump, the current President Trump. So in that election, when Hillary Clinton was coming and giving her speeches, the journalists, whether men or women, they were talking more about the length of her skirt and the height of her heels or size of her heels rather than the content of her speech. And that's how and when we are talking about the size of the skirt, the length of the skirt and the size of the heel, are we really evaluating her on her ability to be able to become the president of the largest democracy in the world, or are we, undermining her abilities? We were evaluating everybody, whether men or women. Journalists were evaluating President Trump on his speeches and not on what he was wearing, and that is how women lose out in politics. In India, we have this mandate that we have to have there's a quota where 1/3 of the village heads should be women. So it's a mandate to the political parties. So when the mandate started, of course, the politicians, their wives and their sisters and the mothers came and they fought the elections and won the election because of the men behind, probably not by themselves. But what we see is in such cases is that after about 2 to 3 years, same women who probably didn't have a voice and were speaking the man's voice, what's happened is we find that they started having a voice of their own, and the villages with women as their heads were doing far better than others in terms of sanitation, in terms of health, in terms of education for women. So women in politics are definitely going to be more equitable. And even in my last talk, I did talk about, even in COVID crisis, women are doing far better. Women president or head of whichever country has head of a state as a woman has done far better than the other countries. So all the 6 or 7 states which have done extremely well, which includes New Zealand, Taiwan, Iceland, and Finland, and Germany, have all women heads of states. So politics we need. Countries would thrive if we have women heads of state. In social, it has been seen there's a global happiness index that was done, and in global happiness index, it was seen they talk about life satisfaction, and the life satisfaction is much higher in countries where there is more equitable distribution of work within men and women. There is more equity, gender equity where there is, and we're talking about some of the Nordic countries. So what is about life satisfaction, and life satisfaction includes both happiness as well as wellness. So when we do, when we see, so statistics is there that when there is more equitable distribution of work between men and women, and when there less stereotyping, definitely the happiness is more. I mean, we would be happier as a country. And while we talk about the saints, etc., we know that our country is not amongst the happier ones. Then we talk about the economy. Economy as a whole is going to be, economy as a whole, if you are aware, McKinsey report on gender parity, you can again look it up, it's all there on internet. The world is going to gain $12 trillion of growth by 2025 if it's more equitable. And India is going to, assuming, I mean, this report was about 2014 or 15, I don't recollect. So they had done a calculation. If things remain as it is, and if India's gender parity becomes more like its neighbor, they're not talking about the best in the world, they're only talking about countries like Thailand, etc., where it is the gender parity is better than our country. So if we only come to that level, we are going to grow our GDP by 10%, as is, and then 10%, and that's equal to about $770 million, and that's quite a lot, 2025. So if we want that kind of thing, we need to bring up women more in our workforce. In workforce, it has been seen companies with highest representation of women at the top management, I mean the entire the 2-3 levels of top management, have better financials or better profits. They outperform companies with the lowest. So we are talking about the best and the lowest, not the median. So best and the low, we're talking about the difference of profitability is 34%, which is quite a lot. Companies outperform in terms of all financials, whether it is bottom lines, whether it is shareholder value. On all the financials, companies with more women at the top perform much better. So, but what's stopping women from going on the top? That's the whole question. So the whole thing about gender stereotyping, that is our assumption about what a woman should be and what a particular man should be, is harming how she goes up. It impacts her confidence levels. And perhaps in my next session, I'm going to talk about something called microaggressions. But today I'm not going to do that. And in my, statements like, okay, we talk about mansplaining, like, in meetings, it has been proven that when a woman speaks something and a man speaks the same thing, the man's voice is heard and woman's is not heard. If a woman says something, even if it's the intentions are very, very benevolent, the man comes ahead, what she means is, that's called mansplaining. So all this is harming, and a whole lot of other things is harming women's growth in organizations. So while we are talking about organizations, on the other side, even in the startup world, the women's access to funds is much, much, much less than that. And in one of the experiments where the women were given a script and the men was given a script to speak when they're pitching for funding, so they were trained by the same people, and they presented to the same people. So when women were speaking, the investors asked questions on their performance. How many customers do you have? How do you get your revenue, etc., and how they performed in the past. Whereas when men were presenting the same pitch, they were asked about potential. That is, how will you acquire customers? So they're talking about future. So which actually hampers the ability of hers to be able to source funds. So it is not her abilities, but it is somebody else's perception about her abilities that hampers her ability to source funds for her startups. And this, despite the fact that women's startups are doing much better than the men's startup. The statistics is all there out on the internet. So they are doing, and despite that, they again, Kenny asks, where does India lie in happiness and wellness yardstick? Kenny, I would not take that in account right now, but we are not a very happy country. I mean, it's all there in the internet, and I can share information about that in this. But yes, India is not on a, it's not a very encouraging thing when where we are, despite our glorious history. So coming back to the corporate world, women, the labels that we use for men and women, if she's ambitious, no, rather, he's ambitious, she's aggressive, he's boss, she's bossy, for the same behavior. Mind you, I'm talking about the same behaviors. She should be a little soft. She's a woman. She should be a little soft. She shouldn't behave like that. She shouldn't be so aggressive. He's persuasive. He's used his persuasion. She's pushy. He's dedicated, and she's selfish. So if he stays back till till late in the night, then he's very, very dedicated. But if she stays, oh my God, look at her. She's so selfish. She doesn't care about her family. So with this, we are harming not the entire society. Today, if I ask the men out there today, if the pressure on men because of the stereotyping to earn 2x next year, 3x after let's say 5 years, and 5x after 10 years is so high that if he doesn't earn as much, everybody considers you're not a man enough, you're not trying hard enough. The pressure on a man is so high, and this is because of the stereotyping. Now, imagine how many of you men out there would like to take an year off, do something that you like, and then come back to your workforce with, rejuvenated, renewed energy. That choice is not even available to you. Now imagine if it is available, if the stereotypes were less, and if even it was all right for a woman to earn for the family, if it, that choice was available to you as well, we would definitely be a happier world. So, Gillette says it's very beautifully, it says in the Gillette ad, says very beautifully that about, look yourself into the mirror. Am I the best I am? Now, this is an opportunity for me to see whether, I am being kind of pressurized by the stereotypes or expectations of the others, or my expectations about others' expectations about me being a woman. Am I being drowned by that, or am I the best that I am? If I am not the best, and in the past I have been I have followed the stereotypes that were expected of me, then what happens at the back is that one is that I can feel victimized, that I'm victim to the entire society. The other thing, I can look at it as an opportunity. Okay, so far I was like this. What can I do next? How can I bring up my next generation to be, more equitable with each other? How can I contribute in the society? So what are the learnings for me? So to be the best I can be is most important, and for that I need to get out of the stereotypes. So when I'm happy, my family is happy. When my family is happy, I'm contributing to the happiness of the country, and I'm also contributing to the happiness of the world. Bani, yes, we have one moment. So thank you. That's about me. Let me see how many questions. Riti says true. And thank you, Riti. I don't know at what point you said that. So Kenny will discuss it later with Sandeep. And I told about this happiness index. Rajni says, Madhu, love to hear you talking on issues like this. We get a synopsis. So Rajni, my request is, let's not call it issues. Let's call them as is. If we look at them as issues, we might consider ourselves as victims, and we might consider ourselves as, poor us. But we are not poor. It is generations of conditioning. yeah, the whole thing about the toxic masculinity and femininity, etc., is generations of conditioning. So if we have to come out of it, I mean, let's just not call it issues. That's all I'm saying. We get a synopsis of so much reading material in 30 minutes. Thank you so much, Rajni. That's really, really nice of you. Bani, we have a lot of expectations from you. Patriarchy not only suppresses women but puts this pressure on men to be masculine. Never cry and be a breadwinner. So true. And it's not the men that we're talking about, it's the patriarchy, which is the demon out there. The more we the this demon cannot be fought. It has to be very gently addressed, and we have to all be in it together. We can't be fighting against men or women that your thinking is wrong or this is wrong. We can't do that. Perhaps it worked earlier, but today it's not there. And it is true, patriarchy and toxic masculinity are together, and the caste system put together, and too many other things. It's a very complex thing. What can I do? Look at it. What can I do as an individual to perhaps rise above these stereotypes and be what I want to be, and appreciate other women and men who are wanting themselves to be what they are. So thank you, Bani. And of course, to add to that, men can't wear pink, and men can't, the red pants can only be by Ranbir Singh. And not anybody else in my family. So even if they want to wear red pants, they can't. I think instead of blaming the gender, we should blame the institution established by our past generation. Understand, definitely blaming does not help. But can we take the ownership that blaming does not help. Whether we blame our institutions, whether we blame the gender, it doesn't help. But can we own? What's more important to think is, what can we own? What can we do, to bring a change in the entire system? To bring what is one little step that I can do? If I can help myself and one of my neighbors or one of my friends or my siblings, I think I've done a whole lot to the humanity. And it is said, when somebody stands for themselves, they're actually standing for the whole community. When a woman stands for herself, she's standing for her whole community of women. When a man stands for a particular a particular behavior, he's standing up for the entire community. He's actually helping. In fact, if you remember, this Amir Khan's program, I remember one man had actually started crying. She's saying that when we were young, the high school was a little further away, and I refused to go with my sister. As a result, my sister could not continue her studies because it was so far away, she couldn't go alone. And he was crying. He says, I wish I knew this earlier. So when he did that, I'm sure he stood for a lot of other men who are currently thinking they can't do this, they can't be seen with a sister too much. Exactly. Acknowledgement is the first step towards change. Thank you, Bani. So any other questions? Or any other observations, anything else you'd like to share? Thanks, Bani. Thanks. Your contribution is really, really helpful, and especially coming from your generation. We have a lot of hopes on your generation. Please keep up the good work, and it's important that we all are in it together. So thank you. Thanks a ton, everyone, for joining in. Thank you, Claire, for joining in. Sandeep, we have to continue the conversation. Thank you, Piyush, for joining in. Kenny and Riti and Rajni. Thank you, everyone. So have a good day ahead and stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.